All right, we're back. It is it is COMP229, and it is week 1, part 2 of our broadcast in the fall 2016 semester at Centennial. And you asked for the book. This is your book. It's Build Your Own ASP.NET 4 website. That's what it's called, using C# and VB. It's a 2011 book, which I don't recommend. That is the most modern book, but it uses ASP.NET 4. And the book is available, I think, even through Safari Books Online, if you wanted to get it, right? So it's pretty cool. So what are we going to be talking about today? There's going to be 2 parts. If you notice up online, up on your eCentennial, there's 2 parts to this presentation. Presentation 1 is about 20 pages, and the second one's about another 40-something pages. So it's about 60 pages in all. If you figure about one minute a page, if we're going at that rate, about another hour of just this, right? Am I going to read every single page to you? Absolutely not, right? Because that doesn't make any sense for us to read pages. You can read it on your own. However, what I will do is kind of hit the highlights. So let's talk about what we're going to be talking about today. Last week, you kind of talked about this as well, and this is kind of a review. This document is kind of a review of what we did kind of last week in kind of a nutshell. We're going to be talking about the ASP.NET web page structure in this presentation, what ViewState is, which is something new that ASP.NET gives you, right? The idea of namespaces. And again, if you know JavaScript, then you should know about namespaces. We've talked about namespaces before. And directives. Here's what I've done. In the course, they also talk about C# programming. I am not going to go over C# programming again, because all the stuff you know about C# programming applies here for the most part, right? So when we talk about C# programming, all the stuff you need to know is we're going to kind of hit it just in time for you to be able to do this stuff, right? The concepts of programming that you got from programming 2, I'm not going to go over again. I'm not going to redo object-oriented programming. You should know all that stuff already, right? The only thing we're going to be talking about is stuff for the web. Gentlemen in the back, please. Guys, hi. I can hear you all the way here, right? Just try and be a little bit lower. Okay. So what is this page structure we talk about? Well, remember, if I go to an actual page, let me just get rid of this for a second. There's going to be fireworks in this course, unless you're making logos. If we're going to make a page, let me start off a new project with you guys today. So I'm going to say File, New Project, right? And what we're going to do today, like I promised you, is I want to create a project from scratch. So if you have Visual Studio, I think there's Visual Studio in front of you. You can do it with me, all right? And I recommend don't watch this, guys. Please do it with me, because the little piece parts, I'm going to ask you to do stuff from scratch a bunch of times. And we're going to start off with the web and ASP.NET Web Application .NET Framework, that one, okay? There's several other options here that we can access. For example, if you have the latest version of Visual Studio 2015 with Update 3, like I do, then you'll have a couple of other options here. ASP.NET Core, which is really cool, right? I still think it needs another iteration. Core is at Core 1 right now, and I think it's the most modern application for the web that Microsoft offers, yes. We don't touch Nancy either, right? It's just another framework. For now, all we're going to do is ASP.NET Web Application, all right, that one. I'm going to change the name, so it's going to say, going to be, again, comp, if I can do this properly, comp 229, and it's going to be 2016, lesson 2. Okay, that's what we're going to do with it, right? It says create new solution. Notice that there's a couple of things here. I have not clicked Application Insights. Please do not click this button. You click this button, your app will never deploy, all right? So please don't click this, right? Microsoft offers Application Insights to give you some performance details or statistics on how and to optimize your performance of your website. This is not part of this course, so please don't click this, okay? If you leave it off the whole time, that would be good, all right? Anytime you have Application Insights turned on, that's why I'm spending time talking about it, it'll mess you up from an Azure deployment perspective if you ever want to go there. So please turn that off, right? It won't mess you up. I got to take that back. It'll make Azure deployment more challenging, all right? Let's press OK here. All right, next stage. The next page you're going to get is this page where you have a bunch of templates. That's what these are. Last week, we clicked on the Web Forms template, and you're going to say, well, can I build my portfolio site with the Web Forms template? You know what? I'm going to ask you not to, right? I'm going to ask you not to pick any templates and start from scratch. Why? because this is going to be your portfolio template. You're going to learn about ASP.NET from scratch by clicking empty, right? The next one we do when we make our game tracker, we'll probably choose web forms, this one. But for now, we're only going to be choosing empty. So please choose that one. Okay, notice that there's an option that says host in the cloud. Please do not choose host in the cloud. Okay? And also, there's another section over here that says web forms, right? So when I click on this one, see how there's a check mark here that's automatic that kind of clicks on, right? But there's also this other right here about authentication. If I click this empty, I don't get the authentication turned on. However, sometimes it behooves us to check this box, this web forms box up here, because it adds additional references for our web forms. Even though we can create an empty website, click on this web forms box. So please click that. All right? So it's empty with the web forms references for the core references if we need to do anything else. Because if you're going to do anything else afterwards, we need to add them in afterwards anyway. So you might as well add the references in now. Okay, let's press OK to go to the next step. I'm not choosing unit test, by the way. All right. It'll take a bit of time to generate your application. Now, for me, I'm using a virtual machine, so it might take me a step longer than you, right? Or it may not, right? Some of your virtual machines may run a little slower than mine, or your machine in front of you might run slower than my virtual machine. It's okay. Don't worry about it, right? Notice how it's cycling. This is normal sometimes for a virtual machine because I'm allocating memory, right? Here's something. I've hidden everything. Remember some of these things, we talked about Visual Studio last week. Again, remember that I can hide the Solution Explorer here, right? So that's what I've done here. I've got the Solution Explorer. I've got what I've got here is a structure. And notice that I have a web config file. I need that. A packages.config file, which is, it keeps track of all the packages I've loaded in. A global ASAX file, which I want to have on. I want to include this one for sure, for routing. We don't need it right now, but we will, right? A models folder, which right now is empty, folder, which is also empty. That's what the extra click that I made was, that check mark. Added those extra folders and additional references behind the scenes that you don't have to worry about right now. Okay? Okay, we're going to make our first website, and we're going to go, I'm going to switch back and forth between the pages. So this is, we're talking about structure here. So remember, when you're structuring your website, I want part of every website. We've done this before for people who are with me. What are the 3 folders that you should pretty much have in every one of your websites? Thank you. Assets, script, and content. And why? Because these are the standard names that Microsoft uses. And if we keep the standardization of the names, not because you couldn't use, instead of content, CSS, and instead of scripts, JS, you could certainly rename stuff like that. But let's keep standard so that way when you use it, when you make a website without using Microsoft, you can always import into Microsoft and it would understand. So you're not hurting yourself from doing it this way. So I'm going to right-click here on your project. So this is the solution level up here, and this is the project level. So I'm going to right-click on the project and add those 3 folders. I'm going to go Add New Folder, right? And we're going to put in, again, Content. We're going to right-click. I'm going to go Add New Folder, right? And we're going to say Scripts. We got Content, Scripts. And what's the last one? There's 3 folders, Assets. That's ours. That's our folder for everything else we're going to add for multimedia, sound, anything else we want to add in our website. That's what's going to be in there. So we're going to have an assets folder. Okay, good. So now we have we're starting to scaffold out our structure manually, right? That's what we're doing here, right? So app data. Eventually, our app data folder is where our database is going to be. Our database is going to live inside of our app data folder because we're going to be doing our database locally, right? Okay, so this is this part. Now, I want to build up a new web form, right? But before we do a web form, we need to put a master page. And we're going to talk about master page in a second. So we've got our site structure. And this refers back. I'm just going to kill some of this stuff here. So I've got some of these pages here that I'm going to kill, right? I've got several of these. So I want to get rid of this one. And let's get rid of this one. So I've got 2 pages. So I can go back and forth. So I can do one of these. Okay, so we're talking about this site structure stuff. So remember that all of our pages And again, they have to start with either default.aspx, index.aspx, right? One of those two. It cannot be myhappybirthday.aspx or this is my beautiful site.aspx. It will not work unless you specifically tell the IIS server, and for Internet Information Server, that is your startup page, because it looks for those two pages, default or index.aspx or index.html or default.html. You can use HTML pages here as well, right? But it's got to be one of those. And because we're using ASP.NET, it's going to look at default.aspx or index.aspx first, index.html. Okay? So you need to structure your pages that way. So what happens is on the front end, right? Again, I'm not going to read this thing. On the front end, the client makes a request to the server, right? The server goes back, does its business in the cloud. I want you to think about this as it processes your request in this cloud area right here, and then returns it. It renders the response as HTML. All right? This is a very important diagram because that's what it does. ASP.NET, it doesn't operate like regular index, like a HTML, right? Actually, it works the same with Node.js and PHP or any other backend service, right? You're going to send a request to the server. It's going to render your pages and spit them back out. And sometimes what happens is it's also going to route your pages. I'm going to my contact page. Okay, good. I'm looking for my contact page. I'm going to set a GET request to the server. I'm looking for contact. Do I have a contact page? Yes. Okay. Am I using a site master page? Yes. What content is going in there? Take the content and my site master page, smash them together, and render out my response to the client. Okay? So we're going to be talking about parts of a page. We've talked about this last week, directives. So what's a directive? Well, if I set up a new page, and let's set up one that's not using a master page. We'll create one, and then we'll get rid of it and create it again, so you see it from scratch, okay? So I'm going to right-click on my project, right? And I'm going to add, and if you notice in my quick hits, right, I have web form if I want to, but I want you to do it the long way. So I want you to click New Item. I'll wait till this comes on in a second. It will. So Add New Item. All right. It's going to take you to this new Add New Item dialog box. This is a dialog box, right? And the Add New Item dialog box, you have several options. One of them is HTML page. We don't want that one. We want web form. There's also web form with master page, which we're going to do later on, but we don't have a master page yet, so we're just going to click web form. All right. We're going to choose this web form. We're going to call it default.aspx with a capital D, right, which is a little bit different. When you create this, it's going to give you this page. This is the default page that you've already seen, right? Here's what we want to have in our pages, all right? There's some stuff that I don't want you to do. For example, XMLNS 1999, get rid of that, all right? We're going to modernize our pages here for a second, right? Because it doesn't make any sense, right? So we're going to say lang, I'll wait till it comes on. Lang is equal to English, right? Because that's our localization we're talking about here. That's one thing we need to add in. Let's take away this space. Okay, cool. We need that. And the other thing we need is a couple meta tags we're missing, right? We need a meta tag, right, for character set. If you notice, if you type character set, it replaces it for you, is equal to UTF-8. We want to have special, specify that our characters UTF-8 so that the browser has less chances for errors and it gives you better responses, right? The other thing is, I remember I talked about all of our pages should be responsive, right? And one of the things we want to put in for a meta tag for responsive web pages so that it works across different platforms, different viewports, is we want to say name is equal to viewport, right? And content is equal to, and if you notice, this way you have to type in device is equal, or width, sorry. Width is equal to device-width, comma, initial scale is equal to 1. What this says is basically that, hey, you know what? Our page is going to take its width, the width value of our pages is going to look at the device width, right? So whatever the device is, if I'm using my iPhone, it's going to look at the width of my viewport, my view screen, and it's going to use that as the whole width, right, of my page. Initial scale of 1 means, hey, scale it so that's 1-to-1. I could also choose an initial scale of 0.5 if I want to, or something else, which means I'll be half the scale. right? I won't use the initial scale. This is the standard one that you want to use, this meta tag here. In your title, you want to put in what this page is about. You know, like maybe ASP.NET, you know, or maybe learning ASP.NET. We'll put learning ASP.NET because that's what we're doing here, right? Learning ASP.NET. There we go. Okay, so we have several things here. We have our directive on the top here. This first line, line 1. Remember we talked about this being a directive, and directives all start with less than, %, and an @ sign. Okay. Here we have our page directive, and it specifies that our language of choice is C#. We can also choose VB if you really want to. We wouldn't want to at this point, right? Because it's not a modern language as much as before, right? Auto event wire up, we talked about. This is a review from last time, which means when I create an event, a button, it auto wires up the back end of our page. Notice that our default.aspx comes with a code behind file, and by default, the code behind file is the same name as our front page, default.aspx, with an additional .cs. This is all review from last time, okay? So that's the first, and that's our directive. Our page directive happens on line, usually on line 1. Okay. Other things we need here. I want to add in Bootstrap, because I'm going to be using Bootstrap heavily in this course, and Font Awesome. Now, I could go out and grab Bootstrap and Font Awesome manually, but that's not the way to do it. We want to do it through NuGet. And NuGet is our package manager for ASP.NET and Visual Studio. That's what we use to get new packages into our applications. So how do I do that? Well, there's 2 ways. I can right-click on my solution, right, and go Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. Or I could right-click on my project and then Manage NuGet Packages. One of the two. They both end up in the same place. It looks like this. Notice that I have 2 packages already. These are the ones from the one I checked. I checked that web forms box. It gives me these 2 packages, right? And it looks like I can update them. Right? We're not going to do it yet. Let's add the other ones, and then we'll update everything else, right? So let's go back. So if I go to Browse for our packages, I know that I need a couple of things. I need Bootstrap. Bootstrap requires jQuery, so I'm going to have that. And I'm going to need Font Awesome. Those are the 3 things that I want. Font Awesome is an icon library that I can use, right? So that I can use icons, font icons, right, in place of images on my navigation and in other places, right? It's a very modern, very, you know, kind of common thing we do. All right, so first I want Bootstrap. If I just click Bootstrap, and if I click Install, notice that it says my dependency is jQuery here, right? Let's add this in. So I'm going to say Install. All right, cool. So it says I need Bootstrap 3.37 and jQuery 1.91. Still a little old. We're going to fix this in a second. Press OK. So here's Bootstrap. And what it does is it takes our stuff. Take a look. It created a fonts folder. And in the content folder, it dumped in all the Bootstrap stuff. It actually looked for the content folder. If we didn't have it, it would have created it for you. Yeah.
Will this just install it in this project or
just this project?
How do we make it so in every project? So we're not...
We'd have to have a template. We have to use the project template for that. But we're not doing that right now.
Okay.
All right, so let's go to updates. Notice that I have jQuery and I have all these other ones. We're going to update them in a second. Let's go back to Browse. Okay, now I want to find Font Awesome. So I'm going to say Font-Awesome. Press Enter. And there's going to be the one we want is 4.6.3, not 4.6.1. Please don't choose that one. And there's one that says NuGet package only. That's the one you want to choose. Choose that one, right, which is like the second one down. And then press Install. So it's going to take the NuGet package and put it in. And it'll install it into your folder structure, right? So now in content, I also have Font Awesome, right? Okay, I got some updates. Let's do some updates now. So if you notice, I have 3 updates. I'm going to click this X so I can get them all. And now here's one thing I want you to do. I want you to update these 2, but not jQuery yet. Let's update those 2, but not jQuery. And press OK. Yeah. 4.6.3 is the one you want. Yeah. NuGet one only. Yeah, that's the one. Okay. All right. So then you get this one. Now I've got jQuery. This is the last one. And notice that it can go up to 3.1.0, but I don't want it to do that. I don't want it to go to 3.1.0 because if it does go to 3.1.0, it'll be incompatible with Bootstrap. It'll break Bootstrap. So you want to choose a version. Okay, so we're going to click this, and notice on the right-hand side, we can dial in a version, and I want to choose 2.2.4. Right, that's the one I want for jQuery. That'll be the latest version that's compatible with Bootstrap. The latest version of jQuery actually is 3.1.0, but it's incompatible with Bootstrap. All right, so please don't use that one. All right, so 2.2.4 is the one we want. Click Update. All right, so this is the way we download packages, and we do it through NuGet, the NuGet package manager. There's two ways to do it with NuGet. One way is to do it through here, through the UI, and you can also do it through the console. There's actually a console that you can use with ASP.NET Web Applications to download and install packages, right? Very similar to something like a Bower, if you're using Bower, or NPM, right? If you're used to doing Node Package Manager, if you're using Node. NuGet is just a package manager to grab your packages from the web and install them directly into your website without having to download them individually, okay? So that's what this does. Okay, cool. So we've got those. It installed everything, and we've got Font Awesome and everything else. Let's go back to our website for a second, and then we'll take a short break because it's 8 o'clock. I know. So I got to address this other issue too. So notice down here, I want to put together this CSS section. So here's my CSS section. I'll put some comments. So HTML5 comments, CSS section. Here we go. And inside my CSS section, I want to drag and drop. I want to start doing this. I want to say, well, you know what? In my CSS, I definitely want Bootstrap to be first. I want to grab bootstrap.min.css, this one, and drag and drop it in here like this. Boop. It writes the code for you, right? Oh, yeah. My Mac is going to go to sleep soon unless I plug it in. How about that? I did this last time, too. All right. So bootstrap.min.css. I also want to drag in, if I want to use a theme, the Bootstrap theme, you can use this one. This just adds additional colors and stuff. I want to drag this in. Bootstrap.theme-min.css. And then the last one will be fontawesome.min.css, just in order. Notice I dragged it on the end of the last one, and it put these ones in place. So I did all of your pathing and everything for you, and even wrote the code for you. Remember, this isn't a CSS course, and it's not an HTML course. It's about using ASP.NET technologies with Microsoft. And Microsoft makes it really super easy for you to get started by drag and drop. Some people love it, some people hate it, because they're like, hey, it takes control away from me, right? I'm not doing it myself. Maybe I'll forget. Some people are afraid of that stuff. It's okay to be afraid, right? But this is what we're going to be doing here, right? Okay, the other thing I know that for me to make my stuff work, for Bootstrap to work, I need to initialize jQuery, right? So at the bottom of my page, I'm going to make a JavaScript section. We've seen this before. So here's JavaScript section, right? In our JavaScript section, we're going to drag and drop a couple things. One is jQuery. Now, because it's scripts, sorry, I'm going to grab my script from my scripts folder. I'm going to grab jQuery 2.2.4.min.js and put it under here. And I'm also going to grab my bootstrap.min.js and put it under that. So now I have my JavaScript requirements. Okay, I'm still missing two things. I want to have a custom CSS file, so I can do my own custom CSS work if I want to. And I also want to have a custom JS file, so I can do any kind of JavaScript or jQuery that I want to put in for validation. Chances are I will not be using my JavaScript throughout the course. I probably won't use much JavaScript because we're going to use C# on the back end. Okay, so let's do the CSS first. So in order for me to have a CSS, I want to create one. So on my content folder, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to say Add New Style Sheet. So if you notice Style Sheet on the bottom here, this is what I'm doing. Right-click on the content, Add Style Sheet, and then click Style Sheet. Now I'm going to call this something like custom or styles or app. I'm going to call it app, lowercase a, .css. This is my app.css. And if you notice, it just has a body tag. I'm going to get rid of it just so it doesn't collide with anything else. It's like custom CSS goes here. We've done this before. You've seen this before for some of you, right? all we're doing here. Custom CSS goes here. I'll make it bigger so you can see it. There we go. Custom CSS goes here. It's all it's going in there. All right, we're gonna do the same thing with our JavaScript. I'm gonna create a new JavaScript file here under scripts. I'm creating the files first. I'm gonna say add, right? And I'm gonna say new item, or sorry, JavaScript down here on the left in my quick hits. Here's JavaScript file. And I'm gonna call this app.js. Again, it's empty. So I'm just gonna put in, custom, JavaScript codes here. If you have any, which we probably won't too much in the beginning. All right, so that's my JavaScript, but I haven't connected them yet to my website. The way to do that, of course, is drag and drop. So app.css goes at the bottom, right down here. And then on the bottom over here, I have to have my app.js that goes underneath here. Why? Because I want my apps.css to be the last style sheet, right? Remember, my last style sheet is the one that I use, right? So that it's the last thing that takes effect, right? And the same thing goes for my JavaScript. I can't use my JavaScript, custom JavaScript from jQuery or Bootstrap unless they're already attached to my file. All right, so that's my page structure when we talk about structure. All right, let's put in a couple of things in here. Inside my div tag, notice I have a form. I always need, in web forms, one thing you always must know, I always must have a form in every one of my pages. Now you might say, well, why a form? That's where I put in all my controls, right? So each of my pages requires me to have a form. It's not enough to just put in a div tag or whatever. Otherwise, I will not have any access. And the other thing to note is this thing here that says run at server. If I don't have run at server, it does not get processed by the server. So run at server has to be part of anything that I want to modify by the server. All right, so in my div tag, I know that I want to put a class. So I'm going to say content. So I'm going to say, first of all, class to container, right? Now, the container class comes from the Bootstrap container. And if you don't know Bootstrap, I'm just going to go to Bootstrap for a second to bring it up. Some people don't know because they're one of my classes, right? So it's okay if you don't know. It's not a disadvantage. I mean, we're going to talk about it again. But if you go to Bootstrap and if you look at getting started, there is a basic page you can look at. I'm going to kind of make it bigger for you. If you kind of look at Bootstrap, let's make this a bit bigger for you guys to see it. So it gives you a couple of meta tags, and there's another one, this equiv for XUA compatible for IE and Edge, this one. Hey, you know what? Let's just grab this and use it anyway. So I'm going to copy this one, and I'm going to go into my meta tags, and you know what? Let's put it in there just because, why not? Just to be equal with Microsoft, right? What the hell, right? But also what they have here is notice that there is a hello world, and when we start talking about our grid, Bootstrap uses something called a 12-column grid, right? Where each column is approximately 8% of the page, right? So what we do is the way it handles, the way Bootstrap handles responsive design is it uses percentages instead of pixels, right? So that it uses a percentage of the page, right? So if I say this particular control takes up 2 columns, it's like 16% of the page approximately, okay? So that's what it does. In order for me to kick that off, there's a couple of commands that I need to use for Bootstrap. And one of them is container. So this is my Bootstrap container. Row, right? So I got to say something like this. Div, here's the shorthand with a class. So dot is the class of row. And then press tab. Right? So div with a class of row, right? Then after div with a class of row, I want to put in anything, how big my container is. I want to put a hello world, right? But I want to put it inside of another container, right? So there's a couple ways I could do that. I could say h1, and inside my h1, I could put in a hello world, right? But this doesn't exactly do what I want it to. It's going to go out the left hand of my container. It doesn't tell it how many columns I want it for this title to take up, right? An example of that would be if I ran this thing right now. Let's run it. So here's my hello world. I'm just going to click on Control F5, which is run without debugging, right? So it's going to do its building, and it's going to run this thing. And you're going to see the style is going to change from my Bootstrap. It's going to use this new font style, right? It's not the standard font style. If you're using Bootstrap, and if you get this result, you're good. If you get something else, like Times New Roman or some other standard font, something went wrong. You're not using Bootstrap. Okay? Yes?
Like use strict.
No. So, so here's Hello World. That's cool. But what I want to do is I want to put Hello World in the middle of my page. And I'm going to do that with another Bootstrap class. So I'm going to say div with a class of, I want to put in 4 columns on the left. I want to have 8 columns in the middle, right? Or sorry, it would be, 6 columns in the middle, thank you. And then, so that's, am I right? 4 and 6, 10? Okay, I like that. I'll do 10, and I'll leave the other 2 for the other side, okay? So it won't be exactly the middle. I'll say column, medium, offset 4, right? And then I'll go column, right, medium, dash 6. Okay, what does this mean? It means that, and I'm going to press tab. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my H1 tag and put it inside there. So what I'm telling the computer to do with my Bootstrap, don't worry if you don't understand this notation, right? I'm using 2 classes from the Bootstrap library. This one says, I want an offset. I want to increase the left margin by 4 columns, right? So I want to go from the left, I want to push it to the right 4 columns, which is 4 times 8, about 32% of the page. It's going to be on the left-hand side, right? Plus a little bit of margin because I'm using container instead of container fluid, right? And then in the middle, I'm going to say I want 6 full columns in the middle for my hello world. 6 full columns, right? So that's going to say, that means that I'm going to use 6 times 4 or 6 times 8, right? It's 48% of my width is going to be in the middle, and whatever's remaining is going to be on the right side. Let's see what I get now, if it's exactly what I wanted. It's okay if it's not. So I'm going to press Control F5, and my hello world is going to be, instead of here at the left where it was, it's going to be over here. Right? So Bootstrap is a really cool tool. It allows us to align things without using our own CSS. It didn't work for you? All right, it means Bootstrap's not working for you. That's what it looks like. Okay, cool. What if I went too fast for you? Because sometimes I might go too fast, right? Well, there's 2 things. I got the videos, but I'm also going to put it up on GitHub, right? So let's do that part, and then we'll take a short break again. So here's Team Explorer. Notice I'm going to Home. I'm going to click on Changes. I've got all these changes I just added in fonts. I got added in scripts. You should see the same kind of changes here if you've added in Git as your provider, right? I'm going to click on plus to stage everything. Whenever we do GitHub, there's something called the staging area. Okay, so there's a couple of steps. First part is I make all these changes, and then I can kind of tell GitHub what parts I want to track, right? So anything I want to track, I put into something called the staging area. That's what it's called. If I don't want to track it, it's not part of the staging area. I don't have to include it. Right now, when I press the plus up here, I included everything. So everything's in the staging area. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a friendly commit message, right? Which is, in my case, initial commit. This is the initial time I've made my project, right? And then I'm going to click commit staged. So now everything is committed, and notice that there's nothing else left to commit or nothing else to add to my staging area. So now I'm ready to go. Everything is inside my Git package, and I've taken a snapshot of my files the way they are, and I've named them initial commit. That's what my snapshot is. Snapshot of my files. But I haven't connected to GitHub yet. This is all local. Right now I'm going to connect to GitHub. I'm going to click Home. I have a GitHub account already. I'm going to click Sync. And then from here, when I click Sync, it's going to say, hey, you don't have anything to sync up to, Tom. So I'm going to choose this option. Now, this option is available to you if you've got Visual Studio 2015 with Update 3 and the GitHub extension. If you don't have the GitHub extension, you won't see this option. You'll just probably see this one and this one, right? If you only see this one, you can click this one if you really want to. I'm going to use this one because it's built into Visual Studio. All right, it's going to ask me here to create a new repository, which is the name of my project, COMP229 Fall 2016 Lesson 2. I'm going to put it up on Centennial College. That's one of my organizations. And then click Publish. What this is going to do is it's going to go out to GitHub, create the repo, and then push my files from the local repository to the remote repository. That's what it's doing. So you guys can see it, and if you want to compare, if yours is not working, now go check on GitHub to see what you've done differently than me, right? So I'll go to GitHub, and if I look at Centennial, there's Centennial, you can see now that I have another project called COMP229 F2016 Lesson 2, right? So that's the new one. So if you look through there, you'll see two things. One, there'll be a project within the project, right? So here's my COMP229 Fall 2016 Lesson 2. That's what Visual Studio has done. It's also created a gitignore file, and if I click into the gitignore file for a second, it'll show you all the different extensions and stuff that it's ignoring, right? So anything in here that's listed, it's ignoring. It's ignoring the SUO file. It's ignoring .user files. It's ignoring user cache files. It's ignoring solution doc states. It's ignoring a bunch of stuff, right? These are all the different extensions it's ignoring. All right? That means there's going to be some stuff that's going to be up on GitHub that are not part of your project. Your project is going to be more complete on your computer than it is on GitHub. However, you can recreate it if you download it and launch it. Visual Studio will recreate the parts that you need to. For example, it'll download all your NuGet packages for you. So the NuGet packages are not included inside your repository online. Okay? Let's go back. Okay, so I've got 3 commits here, and if you notice, 2 of them are made for Microsoft. Add the gitignore and git attributes file, and add my project files. Those are 2 that are made by Microsoft, although it says that I did it, right? And then 1 is me. Here's my initial commit, and that's all the files that I added in there, right? Those are the 3 snapshots for all my file changes as we go. So if you just do this for your assignment number 1, if all you do is this, you lose 2 marks, right? Because this is just putting your files up on GitHub at the last minute. It's a backup, right? You don't want this. You want to go along and develop as we go. All right, so does this help you at all? Yeah. All right, so this is your code. And for our visitors, you can also look at the code too, so you have everything that I have. Okay? Any questions so far with what we've done? Okay. Not yet. All right, so this is our page, and I want to look at our structure here, because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about our directive. We're also talking about declaration blocks and render blocks. All right, and we haven't talked about ASP.NET server controls. We're going to do that today. There's also something called server-side comments we can do. Right now, these are client-side comments that we're using, right? But sometimes what we want to do is we want to put server-side comments. And the reason why we want to do that is because we want to make a comment that's going to be ignored by the server. Okay? Here's something that I want you to do. If I start typing in here a comment, I'm just putting it out there to you. For example, if I start putting in some comments about, who I am and so on, be very careful, because it can mess up your code. Like, I would put my comment probably underneath the doc type. That's where I put my comments, like underneath the doc type before HTML comments. And if you notice, if I start typing, something's wrong, right? But as long as I do this, I'm going to be okay. For example, if I put something like, my name, that's me, right? And maybe what I want to put it is my student number. So if I put a student number or student ID, right? There's my student ID, and then maybe what I want to put in here is also the date. So here's the date, which is today, which is September. What is it, 14th today? Right. So that's the date, and maybe a description. Yes, this is like my default .aspx file, right? That's what it is. So for the file name. I mean, that's minimum stuff, but this is the kind of stamp that I want you to put in on some of your things, right? Now, here's a key. If you do this afterwards and it doesn't work, you got a problem, right? Because sometimes comments mess you up if you put them in the wrong place, especially for HTML. So if I run this thing, Control F5, and if I put them in the wrong place, this won't fire, this won't trigger, and I won't get my hello world, right? So please, whenever you add stuff into your page or change something, test it to see if it's okay. Okay, can I use this same comments in my JavaScript file? What's wrong with these comments? These are HTML comments. They're not JavaScript or C style comments, right? So I can't do it. I have different kind of comments. I mean, I could copy this the first time, right? And then change these symbols or whatever. I could do that. So I copy it, and I can go into my JavaScript file. So here's my app.js, right? And if I put them in here, it's going to be an error, right? Automatically it's going to be an error. But I could replace these with this. And I could do that by pressing Control F, right? And searching for those, right? And what I want to do is I want to replace this by this. I could do that and replace all. So I can do that for the first time. And I could also replace this, right, by the other one. I could do that. So I could search and replace. Now I have comments that are worthy, right? They're going to work, right? So there's my comments. It's obviously not right because it's not the default ASPX file. In this particular case, it is the app.js file. That's what it is, right? And I could take these same comments now and slap them into my app.css. Here's my app.css, right? And I want you to do this, guys. I'm telling you to do this because I'm showing you, because what I want you to do is I want you to use your comments, put them in there, so at least we have a who's part of this file. There's one other place I want you to put this now. I put it in those two places, but even here inside my default.aspx.cs file in the C# file, you can put them in here as well. I recommend, again, either above your namespace is okay, right? Like that's okay. You can do that. You can also take away some of these things, right? I don't need to put, this is multi-line comments. I'm using them as single-line comments, right? I could do something like this. I could say, okay, take this away and take this away and take this away, right? And take this away and take this away. I could do that too, right? Because these are multi-line comments, right? And that's all good, right? That's a multi-line comment, right? If you want to decorate it, you can do that. I don't recommend you decorate it too much though, because that's a waste of time, right? Comment decoration, like putting in these little asterisks and whatever. I don't recommend doing that. It's a waste of time. This would work too. Okay. So comments. This is going to be ignored by the compiler on C#. And the same thing goes here. This is going to be ignored, right, by the compiler in JavaScript, the interpreter. And this is going to be ignored by the interpreter, for things. So you can take some of these away if you want. Okay, comments. But you can also add something called server-side comments. And the way you would do that is you put the %, right? And then what you want to do is when you start typing comments, and if you were to look at this, I will show you the comments in here, right? So again, we talked about directives. It starts like this. All directives start like this, right? There's two main ones, page and import. We're not going to hit the import too much, right? You're going to see a lot of this, which basically tells you the title of the page, which is a home page, and the language, which is C#. Now I've kind of hard coded the title in there. That's okay. We're going to get back there in a second, right? But as we go, you're going to see that you can also put things like inline script. You're going to see a lot of stuff in the book. The book example shows a lot of inline scripts like this, right? I don't recommend. This is poor style, right? Great for teaching if you want to put everything in one page so you don't have to flip between pages, but bad from a development perspective, right? Because from a development perspective, we should never put our code like this in line, right? Because that means each page has to have that code. I can't reuse that code. This is completely non-reusable code here, right? Whereas if it's inside of my code behind file or whatever, or other files, I can make it actually part of other class files. It can be reusable. That's the right way to do things, right? So we would never want to try and do it this way. And that's why it's called, these are called code render blocks, right? So if I do it like this is an example of an inline code render block, right? We're using this less than % and then % greater than. It's writing C# code. This is not JavaScript. This is C# code that gets interpreted or compiled by the at compile time, right? It gets compiled on the server side and rendered on the front side, right, on the front end. Again, I would never do this way. This is old style ASP.NET, classic ASP is what this is doing right now. This looks actually very similar to what you might see in something like a PHP language, right? They do a lot of this kind of stuff where they take code blocks and there's a code render block. Now, this can also solve problems for us sometimes, right? We use old style, render blocks like this because we want to do something that we can't do on the back end so easily. We want to do it right in that specific space. An example is I want to take the title and I want to pump the title in here, right? So I can use the less than % equal sign title, and I can take the title from the that I'm getting in the directive and pump it into the title in the head of my document, right? So if I go back there as an example, notice that I don't have a title attribute here in my my directive, but I can add it in. I can say title is equal to, like I have down there, learning ASP.NET, right? I can put the title in place. And then I can use my render block. I can take this out, and I can go back inside this area here where I have my title inside the head of my document and replace it with less than % equal sign and then title. And notice it comes up. Like it actually gives me code hinting to tell me that it's okay. Right? Sorry? That's fine to do, right? That's the way you would do it. Okay? Because sometimes what happens is the title would be up here, but this piece, the head of my document, wouldn't be right here. It'd be inside my site master page, right? So I'm taking the head of my document that I define in my directive in my default.aspx page as an example, but all this other stuff, the head of my document and the body tags and the closing body tags, they're all inside another file, and that's why we do it this way, right? For now, it's the same file, so there's no advantage, but in the future, you can see that. By the way, I could also do, because these are multi-line comments, I could also take these away as well, but I just put them in there so you can see that this is not a particularly bad stop. Yes? This can be a reference in this page, but because I'm gonna break up the head of my document to give me the same look and feel across different documents. Instead of me recreating my navigation and the head and the body of my document, for example, I don't want to always add in all of these, right? My CSS files. My CSS file should be across every document, right? Every page. So I wouldn't want to do this again and again. That's kind of, you know, these gymnastics are kind of unnecessary, right? Same thing with this every single time. I don't want to put in my JavaScript, so I'm going to have a master page that I'm going to show you how to do today that does all this, and then I'm just going to have a content area, but I'm going to have at the top of my directive the name, the title that's going to go into the site master. It's going to replace the template with my real title, and that's why we do it this way, right? You're going to see. So bear with me. I know there's no real use right now, but there will be. Let's test this out to see if it works. So I'm going to kind of Control F5. If there's any problems, any kind of stuff, guys, I'm going to ask you to leave soon, eh? You guys are way too loud. Like you guys are talking over me. I have to talk louder because you guys are talking, right? So just try and whisper. I don't know. Do whatever you want to do. If you want to have a conversation, go outside and come back, right? Sorry about that. But so notice that I still get my title, learning ASP.NET, right? I still get this, even though I didn't physically put it in the title anymore. I'm getting it from my directive. So my directive is my attribute. Here's my attribute inside my directive. And I'm taking the attribute from my directive, and I'm pumping it inside this area by using this render block. And this is old school ASP.NET that we can actually use with web forms, right? Do I recommend it? Not everywhere, but in this particular case, it's okay because we're taking that item from the value from our title and putting it in there, right? So this one, the other page here. All right, let's keep going. We're going to talk about ASP.NET controls, HTML controls, and web user controls in the next PowerPoint. But I want to keep going here. Now, one thing to note is that we must use this form, like I said to you, this with a run at server. Run at is an attribute that says where the form is going to be rendered or where the attribute is going to be rendered. For example, this whole area right here, from the start form to the end form, it's going to be going to the server. The server is going to take this information and do something with it, right? And I need to do that when I want to use web forms. Or otherwise, I'm not using C#, I'm using some other language, right? By the way, I could mix and match if I want. I could use JavaScript, right? A very loosely typed language, right? And C# if I want, but why? C# is way more powerful than JavaScript from the get-go, right? And so that's why we use the server-side language. We actually do use JavaScript for validation purposes on the front end. But like I said last week, I can always turn the validation off on the front end. If I'm a smart hacker, I can turn the front end validation off. So there's no front end validation. But If I use C#, the backend validation always triggers, so I can stop hackers, smart hackers, from doing that kind of stuff. And you always do that. It doesn't matter if it's C# or Java on the backend, or PHP or Node.js or something. You want to validate it on both sides, on the front end and the back end, to prevent hackers from messing up your site. Okay. So I'm going to skip through this. Advantages of server controls. They do separate presentation from logic. That's one thing that server controls do. We're going to talk about what server controls are in a second. Think about server controls as, I have custom controls that only ASP.NET uses. And what they do is they take my syntax and translate it into an actual HTML that gets translated on the other end. That's what happens with server controls. So when we talk about server controls, that's what we're talking about. So here's an example of a, again, of a server-side comment, right? It looks very similar to HTML comments, but we use these less than % and then dash dash. So if I was going to do the server-side comment up here, and if I try this out, so if I said % dash dash, and I said, you know, and again, I got to use dash dash %. Notice that I got to use it on both sides, right? If I don't do it on both sides, I'll have an error. So please check this out. So this is ignored. Notice that it's green, right? And if I run my page again, I shouldn't have a problem. If I get a problem when I do my server-side comments, something's not right, right? You're messing up your page with comments. You don't want to use server-side stuff and then mess up your page, right? Now, why would I want to do this? I don't see any reason. That's the answer, right? I probably wouldn't do this server-side stuff. I probably use, you know, front-end stuff to do my comments. One thing that people do use server-side comments is that they don't appear on the front end at all, right? So, for example, if I want to hide some of my comments and I want to only put them on the server side, because remember, it's rendering in C#, they will never render on the front end. So that's why people use server-side comments. They have hidden stuff on the back end. For us, you can use front-end comments or server-side comments. Doesn't matter to me, as long as there's comments on the page that represent you. It tells me that this is you're the developer, not somebody else, right? Okay, so we talked about that. ViewState. This is super important, ViewState. So what Microsoft does by default, it enables something called ViewState. So when I have a control, let's say, for example, a text box, right, or some kind of input control, and I enter information into that input control, between trips to the server, it remembers. So I send it off to the server and come back, my data's there, right? So normally what it is we have HTML is stateless, right? There is no connection between my front-end page and my server. I send a request to my server, it gives me a response, and then it forgets. Doesn't know who I am anymore, right? Not so with ASP.NET. ASP.NET, it creates a state. That it maintains state between your front-end page and the server. Now, this could be good, and it could be really bad. As I'm maintaining state, what's ended up happening is I have to make this round trip over and over again. So state is really great, but it's not great for every single page. And sometimes we want to turn it off, right? So further down here, if you notice, this is what happens. This is what you see on the front end when we render our page. An example of this would be if I start rendering my page now. So press Control F5. Right now, my state, my view state, is maintained. So if I was going to do a view source, let's just do view page source as an example. If you notice, there's this really ugly piece right here. There's a piece that has my view state, which is right here, this script. This is something that's being generated. It's hard to see. I'll make it bigger for you guys. So it's hard to see, but here it is. This thing right here is being generated, right? Actually, this is the wrong one. The view state, here it is. The view state is being generated by the server, right? And it's almost like this hash, as an encrypted hash that's being kept in sync with the server. So it's going to maintain any kind of data that I have on my front end or that I pass to my back end. So good and bad reasons. Good reason is it maintains data. On the back end, bad end, I have to keep going back and forth. I have to keep doing that round trip. I'm going to do a request response 20 times. And that's why this technology, web forms, is a little older. It's a little slower, right? In the past, it was good. It was really, really good. There was nothing else like it out there, right? And I try to mimic some of the stuff we can do with PHP. Now, there's a lot of newer technologies out there that say we shouldn't do these round trips all the time because it's just we keep on polling the server and over again. We don't have to, right? So for us, what I'm going to ask you to do is leave it on. It's not going to hurt you. If you really want to, though, if you want to improve your performance of your website, and later on when you create your own, some of your own pages, like your game tracker that we're going to make, right? You can turn it off. And there's ways of doing it. Inside this document, I've put in that you can enable ViewState as false. So I can, for the whole page, I can turn ViewState off. Let's try this out and see if we get anything different. So the command is in your directive at the top of your page, you're going to say enable ViewState is equal to false. By the way, I'm challenging you. I want to see, do you think this is going to work? Remember, this is a book from ASP.NET 4, right? Is it going to work? What do you think? Is it yes or no? Yes? You say yes. Anyone say no? Anybody say that they don't believe that this is going to work? Anyone? Let's check it out. All right. No one said no one put that. I thought you were going to put up your hand because you have nothing to lose, right? All right. Let's take a look. So if I go enable, if I go up to the top and I start typing, right? And if I go enable ViewState, here's enable ViewState. I found it, right? That's a direct a custom attribute, and I put it as false. False, and press save, right? Then after it, if it updates everything, I press Control F5 to run without debugging, right? And let's see what I get now with my ViewState. If I go view source, view page source, do I have my ViewState anymore? What the hell is this? If you said it would be false, you're right, right? Because it doesn't work. Why is that? Because web config, the way our files are structured nowadays, this conforms to the old structure of ASP.NET. ASP.NET has updated, and some of the stuff that's in the book are wrong. Just putting it out there for you. You can turn it off by control if you want. You can enable ViewState as false by control. But in this particular case, unfortunately, if you notice, even though it says it's false, my ViewState is on, right? I turned it off. I swear I did. You saw me turn it off, but still, my ViewState is still on, right? So I'm just putting it out there. So if you see this, the stuff that's inside the book that says enable ViewState is false, this doesn't work, right? There's another piece that's missing here, and if you look it up, if you Google it, if you want to turn off ViewState, you can do that, but you need to do it here and in the web.config file. All right, let's leave that alone. So you understand what it is. So if someone asks you, hey, what's ViewState, Tom? I never got taught ViewState when you did ASP.NET. Here it is. All right. I think that's it for this one. Page, there's two different directive types, page and import. We're not going to talk import in this course. That's not going to be something we're going to be talking about. You're always going to see the page directive at the top of the file. And by the way, the idea of directives is something that's a very modern concept that ASP.NET had in line a long, long time ago with other frameworks like PHP. Okay? That's it for this one. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll actually get to the next slide deck, which talks about all kinds of server controls. And the server controls are going to be detailed on how we can build our page. We're going to build out our page today. All right? Like, for example, our nav bar and our site master page.